there's a reason, I guess, that we write, and part of it is that the cathartic nature of writing. And I wrote this, or at least this piece that I'm going to read a while ago. It was cathartic for me to write then. And I mentioned the part about being the only son, that I often write about my father as well. And he and I have, as many sons and fathers do, a complicated relationship. The title, We Are Pilgrims, We Are Strangers, comes from a hymn called I'm a Pilgrim, I'm a Stranger. We are pilgrims, we are strangers. I should mention this is nonfiction, though I can write fiction as well. We are pilgrims, we are strangers. My father taught me to shoot in the city park across from my grandmother's house during the few months we lived there. I was 10 that spring, the only time I lived in town before college. We'd take the BB gun and cross the street to the park and take aim at the aluminum garbage cans chained to the picnic tables. When I tired or grew bored, my father would take the gun and swing cock it, hold it out one-handed, and tag the lids. Once a police cruiser drove past and slowed. My father shadowed the gun along his leg and waved. The cop kept driving. My father slapped me on the back, somehow telling me that was how things were properly done. My father calls himself a hunter, but for many years I did not believe him. Hunt? No, he harvests, gained solely from his own property. If he itched for ducks and geese, he walked to the canals behind his house. If he grew antsy for deer and elk, he drove 20 miles to his ranch and staked out runs and paths. Before I could carry a rifle, I pushed brush for my father on the annual elk hunt. The hunt ushered in transition, marking the end of farming season. We met at the farm shop, sometimes in snow, sometimes rain, usually a stout wind. In the black, eerie pre-dawn, all of us milled about as serious as wolves. My father divvied assignments to the group. One pickup here, another there, fan out along the hills, plant near the cliffs. Then we left, a cavalcade of headlights humming toward the crags. I carried a pellet gun. My father dropped me in the thick draws and took station up the mountain. I crept through the brush, barrel first. Morning broke. Sun spiraled down through tall conifers and kaleidoscope streams. At that vanishing point of panic, me not knowing north from south, or where the big guns were, or if the hunters would mistake me for wild game, echoes of gunshots sounded. Rough grouse boomed out in flight and scared me so bad I thought I'd been shot. My father has limited memories of my grandfather who died of kidney failure when my father was 14 years old. It was a slow death, spanning years of many bedridden days and hospital visits. But when my father turned 12, my grandfather gifted him a .22 rifle. Unable to buy it himself, my grandfather sent my grandmother to the store to pick it up. But Grandma goofed, and rather than purchasing a single shot, bought her son a semi-automatic. The rifle had a bright chestnut stock engraved with images of ground squirrels and jackrabbits. My father still has it, locked away with the 24 other hunting tools he keeps in the safe in his garage. To go after big game with a .22 is illegal, as the bullet won't kill cleanly. But my dying grandfather loaded up his young buck and took him deer hunting nonetheless. They drove west then north towards Montana. They parked and walked, my grandfather with a .30-30, my father with his pea shooter. In the late afternoon, the duo crested a hill and spotted 2 standing does. My father asked if he could shoot, and my grandfather raised his gun too, ready to clean up if my father missed. But the backup wasn't needed. My father's headshot was a spot-on bullseye killer. I've heard that story a few times, but in speaking about his other youthful experiences, my father is secretive. He's that type of man. It is his nature to sit quietly and wait. After my grandfather passed, my father would spend entire days hunting ducks. He would leave in the morning with his single-shot 10-gauge and a pocket full of shells, and show up at dusk with 5 or 6 mallards, cleaned and ready to broil. Whole days alone on the riverbank, spying the flocks fly down, watching the rafts drift and pick up. I have spent countless hours riding alongside my father in his pickup, across the farm or up and down the ranch, neither of us speaking. Perhaps it's how I know him best. Here's a story for you, Pops. I shot a cat near the granary. I heard you complaining about how many strays were around, so I took my pump-action .22, the one you gave me for my 12th birthday, the only gun I'll ever love, and waited in the driveway until a cat came wandering. It hunched down in the gravel about 20 feet out. I put a bead right on the thick of its chest. I watched that orange tom on the other side of the barrel, and something stirred in me. I put down my rifle. But then, I didn't want you bothered by this cat, so I shot behind it in warning. The lead ricocheted and drilled the cat in the hip. Mewling and caterwauling like I'd never heard, the cat came to me wanting help, crying as it dragged itself through the gravel. I rose up to put it out of its misery, but I balked and ran for the garage. The cat followed and crawled under the Suburban and pulled itself into the undercarriage. I locked the back door. The cat must have died up there, fallen out somewhere on the road. I never found its carcass. You probably didn't see the blood on the driveway. I washed it off with the hose. One epic morning elk hunting, we harvested 4 bulls and 4 cows in a matter of 3 hours. My cousins and I added a few full hens and pot guts we'd left on the mountain. We dragged the elk back to the house and laid them out for a photo, their chest cavities propped open with branches of pine, their blood running rivulets down the hill towards the dirt road. I stood in the photo with my bird and pellet gun, my orange safety hat, my bloody jeans, my slight grimace, one among a dozen other identical men. Time, the champion teacher, the champion hunter, informs me of my father. We kept the heart of every elk we ever cleaned. We would start just below the tail, the elk on its back, legs askew and stiff, and zipper it open. Inside, oily and ripe, tubes and bags of green and maroon, sometimes torn open from the bullet, were salted white with bone shards. My father would go to work with his antler-handled Stanley knife, up to his elbows in gore, slicing and ripping. After a moment, he'd bring out the warm heart, purple and fist-sized. I'd take it from him carefully and put it in a plastic bread sack we'd brought along just for this. After we'd deliver the elk to the butcher, we'd drive straight to my grandmother's. I cannot remember words. It was usually as reverent as church. My grandmother, slender and topped with a gray bouffant, moved from stove to counter in her bathrobe and took the heart from me. Out came a skillet. She sliced the heart in thick slabs like enormous cuts of tomato and laid them in the pan. She'd toast white bread and slather it with real butter and Heinz 57 sauce. When it was time, she forked on the meat and brought the sandwiches to my father and me. I do not crave elk heart sandwiches, chewy and thick and richer than liver. I haven't had one since my grandmother died, and I'm certain my father hasn't either. Sizzle and pop of heart, chew and suck of life. I miss the experience dearly, though it still resides in my mind, as I'm sure it does with my father, though he'd never tell me as much. Thank you.